We are live.
All right. Okay. So, hi, and it's officially good afternoon. So, good afternoon to you both. My name is Jennifer. I'm currently a master's student at U Ottawa. That name might seem familiar to you. A master's student in communications, and I am so glad to be able to speak with you, Frank, for the second, third time, and Travis for the first time. So, how are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Fine, thank you.
All right. So, honorary GGs, how does it feel? How does it feel to be like alumni, like of a great school and just coming back in time, sort of?
Yeah, for me, it feels great because I'm actually here, like recording this from Ottawa, despite the blue background. So it's, and it's literally like, um, around that 30-year mark. So it feels nice to look at the same places and see what's changed, what's new,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in the summertime. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's satisfying for me because I think I had a bit of a tough go of it during my graduate degree, actually, and I felt like I didn't really earn my degree until after I graduated.
Oh my
So it's really nice to look back and say, I laid the foundation there, then I was able to live up to, the expectations of the program eventually.
Oh, that's great. For me, once I get that degree, I earned it. I don't care. Once I take it, like I'm done. I earned it. So you guys were in the Department of English, is that correct? And then you both are authors. Frank, Only Human, and then Travis, The Samurai Project. That's that's amazing. The Samurai Poet, sorry, Poet. I don't know why project came in my head. The Samurai Poet.
It was a
Okay.
long project, so it makes sense.
Well, what do you know? Okay, so could you, Frank, could you start by telling us a bit about Only Human? Then Travis, you could tell us a bit about yours as well.
Sure. So, Only Human, was originally a novella, published in an anthology, really in a series of content about fiction that blends both the futuristic and the ancient in some
Okay.
capacity. Only Human is the standalone version that's available on paperback and now in a new audio version. And it tells
Mm-hmm.
the story of the sport of football. And since we're Canadians, the American sport of football in the future, in which the sport is increasingly, um, with robots playing in the game. So there's some humans
Yeah.
left, but it's more and more robots. So if you think of our current age of technology and the acceleration of AI, machine learning, that's what the kind of story it is. It's aimed at young readers to adults, and it really tries to, imagine, the sport, our favorite pastime, in that futuristic sci-fi setting.
Okay. And Travis.
Well, the Samurai Poet dramatizes the life of Ishikawa Jozan. He lived in the late 1500s to mid 1600s, and he was best known for his poetry and a house that he built in Kyoto called Shisendo. But when
Mm-hmm.
I dug back into his life, I discovered that he was also a samurai who was present at the two most significant battles in Japanese history. So it was interesting, exploring that history and trying to balance the tensions of his life.
Okay, so if I understand, it's a bit of fiction mixed with history and a bit of biography as well.
Yeah, it's definitely historical fiction. So the
Mm-hmm.
genre requires me to, be as accurate as possible. But
Yeah.
fiction liberates me to kind of, imagine, a persona for him and how he might have perceived events. And then I can spice it up with a few things that aren't known to history.
Yeah. Okay. So from your setting, I can see you have a slight penchant for the Japanese culture from the setting behind you, and then the book based in Japan. So is it that you've always had a love for this part of Asia, or there was just something you saw and you were like, I have to write a book about this? Like, what spurred you on?
Right. Well, I lived in Japan for 2 years
Mm,
and I visited Shisendo at least twice during that time. And then there was very little known about his life. So I kind of
okay.
fell into this rabbit hole. And the deeper I went, the more interesting it became. So that's basically the origin of, why I
Yeah.
went this far to write a novel about him.
Okay, because I saw your website and I was like, okay, this seems interesting. Yeah, so that's great. So one thing I noticed between both your books, like the parallel is Frank, yours is set in a time in the future, a probable future that might or might not happen, right? As we were talking about during coffee yesterday, you said the things in the 90s or 80s that was seen as sci-fi, a lot of it is happening right now as reality, and then that's how sci-fi basically evolves. So yours is set in the future, and then Travis, yours is set in the 1600s, 1615, if I'm not mistaken. So yours is set in the past. So like the parallels, like it's not lost to me, and I just want to know, like, why did you feel the need, for each of you actually, why did you feel the need to write about this certain point, at this certain point in history? What was so needful that we need to write about the future that hasn't happened, or we need to write about the past that we never saw? Like, so for each of you, Frank, you go first.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, like, growing up, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. So I was a child when Star Wars came out, when Raiders of the Lost Ark, when the Spielberg movies. So, that was very much my upbringing, along with reading a lot of science fiction. So I read a lot of Isaac Asimov. He pioneered the Three Laws of Robotics, the robot stories, the Foundation series. So, this was kind of my breeding ground. And, like with talking with friends, you always want to tell your own stories. And then I was also very interested in football, my hometown team, the Buffalo Bills. As I was finishing up high school, I also played, and then wanting to kind of blend these two into a story. There's not a lot of material tried to mix the genres of science fiction and sports. So it was always interesting to me to try to tell a story that was kind of rooted in both areas.
Okay. Travis?
Yeah, for me, there's actually a bit of a University of Ottawa connection here because I read this great book by a scholar in the United States named Herman Ooms called Tokugawa Ideology. And I know I would never have been able to understand it unless, I'd had the master's degree and studied literary theory. And it really opened my eyes to a side of Japan that many people aren't aware of. Most people just assume that, when the samurai and the shogun like dominated Japanese politics for a few hundred years, that it was just based on military might. But his book was all about the political dimension and how they took the battle victory and then used politics to, stay in power and have that mastery over Japan for over 200 years. And I saw a lot of parallels between what happened in Japan then and what happens in places like North Korea now with cults of personality.
Yeah.
I thought it was a real opportunity to, show the power of history in the past to help us understand the present.
Well, power in the history of the past to help us understand the present. You would think, I mean, there's this saying, you hear or you say, and it's like, if we only learn from the mistakes or the things that happened in the past, it would help our present. But we never really learn as humans, do we? Okay. That's an aside. All right, but that's interesting. And so I love Japan, like Japan. I love Japanese culture. And then you can see like lately a lot of it has been getting into mainstream media, especially anime, of course. So when people talk about anything related to Japan, mostly the younger generation, they instantly go to anime, or there's Japanese songs, not necessarily like the political or historical aspects of it like you're doing. And then there was a new series that came out, Shogun. So when I heard of your book, that was the first thing that came to my mind. Haven't watched it, but you can see the relationship. So do you think like your book, like the medium you've chosen to express this, which is through writing, do you think that it can still be sustained in this time and age in 2024 when everything is all about Netflix, make it go viral, that sort of thing?
That's a great question. I think there is a challenge dealing with shorter attention spans.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are still people out there that value the reward of an investment in time and reading. And, those are that's the primary audience that I'm aiming towards. You,
Okay.
you create because you feel that internal impulse, right?
Yeah.
And then how the audience, or whether it finds an audience or not, it's kind of out of your hands. But
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about writing. You can't really predict once you put that final period and you're done editing all of that. It's like let the universe do what it will. But Frank, for you, yours is quite interesting because we've had several movies based on your sort of subject matter, excluding sports, like Back to the Future, the XYZ and the future, like it's there's always something about human beings have always wanted to sort of the future, robots, robotics, cartoons, the robots serving us, the robots taking over. So there's always been that mystique and intrigue in movies or in other artworks or art forms. So for you, did you think that only human, like what made you think it was different, that, or did you think it was just something to be added to the litany of other forms concerning AI? And so like what makes only humans stand out from the rest of these things?
Yeah, no, great question. Right. Like, look, there's a lot of, strong robot characters, in our popular fiction, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
books, media. You have the original Star Trek and HAL. You have the droids in Star Wars, C-3PO,
Yeah.
R2-D2. You have the Terminator, right, the more menacing robot. And many other characters I mentioned, Asimov's robot. So yeah, I'm clearly keeping in mind all the data from Star Trek is another example. All these amazing characters, and trying to imagine more what will really kind of sell and what will
Mm-hmm.
really begin to happen in our society. So this is imagining as sports and big business really lock into robots, and kind of bringing in that side of it as well. Like, if you think of, there's already some robot cleaners, right, that you can run
Yeah.
on your floor, so you'll see more of that. So it's really also trying to pull it really into our world, where some of these characters are ideal, these famous characters, but they're not as much closer to our present. So I was trying to maybe bring it a little closer to home.
Okay, okay, that's amazing. So, leaving that aside, let's enter a bit into the technical aspect of, the writing process for each of you. I mean, I know we've talked a bit about this, Frank, but for the sake of this particular interview, we're going to revisit that a bit. Okay, so I'll start with you, Travis. So, history, especially of a different culture. I mean, that must have taken a lot of reading, a lot of research, even going to the actual place, things like that. So, how was your writing process for you? Was it, since you liked the culture, was it easy to immerse yourself in it, or it was a lot of technicalities, a lot of things you didn't understand? How did that go for you?
I mean, parts of it were really enjoyable. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
was able to take a trip back to Japan and visit the site of the main battlefield,
Mm.
see his hometown where Ishikawa Jozan was born. And I even went to Hiroshima to see the castle where he served for a while. So those parts of it were very enjoyable. Um, the grind, and the reason why I would recommend to people that if you're going to write a novel, don't make your first one historical fiction,
Mm.
is the standard of accuracy that
Yes.
historical fiction demands. It's really challenging, and that's why it took me the better part of 10 years to write this novel. Because,
Really?
I would write a draft and I would think I was good. And then I would read a new book and it would challenge something I had. Then I'd go find the fact and say, oh, this doesn't work anymore, and I'd have to revise it again based on some of those
Yeah.
things. So yeah, parts of it were really enjoyable, and then
Mm-hmm.
other parts were very grueling, to be honest.
Yeah, and one thing that I agree with you. So two things you said that stood out. Honestly, what you said, I heard it in another way. Like if you're gonna write a book, don't let your first book be sci-fi. That was another thing I had heard. But now you're saying historical fiction, so that's two different things. Okay. And also the second thing is like the accuracy. That's very important because you know how there are movies or series, a lot of it, that adaptation now based on books or based on novels or based on, biographies being written. So and then if it's not as accurate as the viewer wants it to be, they're quick to shun the movie or, blast the directors or writers or screenplay, all of that. So it's not a different thing if the author wasn't as accurate as they would have wanted it to be. It's a different thing entirely. So I really understand when you meant you had to keep going back to make sure it was as accurate as possible. So thank kudos to that. So Frank, yours is, I know we talked a bit about it, but your technical process. I know yours might have been a different route than his, because his was more of a cultural thing, more of a, a cultural thing basically, because Japan is, a lot of culture. But for you, how was your technical process? How was your grind? How was it?
Yeah, obviously a little different, and I want to call it the audio portion as well. But for me, Only Human is one story in a series of stories that all interconnect. So even though for the reader they're getting this, for me, trying to keep things straight, right? There's some other things in the same universe. So as you're creating a world, that's both fun, but it also can be challenging because similar to what Travis said, where we learn something new. You learn something new about physics or how the
Yeah.
universe works. So you also have to adjust it, and you also want it to be timeless. So a lot of fiction, if it's using a lot of real brand name tech, it will
Mm-hmm.
date itself. So the goal is to try to make it stand the test of time. So
Yeah.
this was originally published 10 years ago. The audio is new. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think it does hold up. And then from the audio perspective, I think that is almost a collaboration. Really, it's trying to take the story out and saying this story can live in different mediums and modality. And that was a ton of fun because, I worked with a voice narrator. And I think one of the interesting lessons is we're talking about AI. The book is literally about robotic characters taking over for humans. And I chose to use a human voice narrator. And I'm very happy with it. He's recorded other stuff in the same universe. So just a
Yeah.
little bit different and a bit similar challenges.
Yeah. I listened to him. He's good. His voice, like instantly, the first thing I said
Yeah.
was I
Can
had
we give him a
to.
shout out? Can we do that?
Yeah. Yeah. Of
Shout
course
out.
we can. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
David. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
David.
David. Yeah. We'll do that at the end. We'll kind of give his credentials. We'll give our sites. We'll do that.
Of course, yeah. I mean, Zara sent me when she sent me the trailer. First thing that came, I had to. The first thing I sent her was, "Who is this narrator? Please, like, is this the author? Is he the one narrating the?" Because I hadn't known about you that he's really good. So yeah, kudos to him. And then one thing you said, so I feel like yours was a bit more technical because, like you said, your setting is a world that doesn't exist yet, and then you're trying to use technology that sounds believable even though it's fiction, that doesn't seem, oh, this is too good to
Right.
be true, right?
Well, and
But
I think
also,
that's where it's like what Travis is doing. So like it's
mm-hmm,
almost like we're wrapping around the past is so far. He has to recreate it, except
exactly.
there's more people also studying in that area, perhaps. But similar, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So for you, for both of you, Travis, for instance, your main character is the Shogun warrior, right? Your main never met him, all of that. So but then you're still trying to, be wrapped in historical accuracy, of course. Was he the most complex character to define, or was there another character for you that was as complex to do so?
Well, he was, he's the central character of the
Hmm.
novel, and he really drives it. If you're not interested in him or the character I create, then maybe the novel won't work for you.
Okay.
But there are two entry points that really helped me. One was his hermitage, Shisendo. The first time I visited, I was walking around. I felt like there was this invisible hand guiding me to different vantage points and saying, "Oh, look at this. Oh, look at that view." And I felt like I was getting inside the mind of the creator. It was just an incredible accomplishment that he achieved with his house and garden. And then reading his poetry is very modern in a lot of ways. He wrote about personal topics. He wrote about his successes and failures in very honest ways. And if you look around at a lot of poetry and written in many cultures in the 1600s, it just didn't take on themes like that. You'd have to go almost to the 1800s and later to find people writing that way. So those two kind of insights made me realize I was dealing with a very unique individual.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I could never capture, his consciousness and what his life was like, if I could at least point out to people that here's this stereotype busting Japanese samurai who lived 400 years ago, you might want to check out his home or read his poetry, then I would consider it a success.
Okay. Before I get to you, Frank. I want to ask you something because as you were talking, something just popped. Did you ever feel there were some times during your writing process you might be crossing the line because you wouldn't want to offend, this culture? Because the Japanese are very, they love respect. They love when they're respected and they love to respect others. So did you think, oh, this might be too, or I don't want to cause any, trouble, not fear of repercussions in a dire way, but out of respect for this people. So.
Well, that's a great question because, like, when I started the novel, um, issues like cultural appropriation were not
Mm-hmm.
mainstream like they are now. Um, I felt a lot of acceptance from, Japanese friends and colleagues, and they, complimented me on some of the insights I had in understanding. So when I started out, I kind of felt like I had this license, you know, along with, the license of writing fiction, to be creative and be original. Now, as I think the book was basically published in its earlier form when, the cultural appropriation debates really, hit the mainstream. And, I had to do a lot of soul searching. Like, obviously, I'm a white male author writing about Japanese culture, and I'm sure there'd be people who would criticize me based on that. But, a couple of my main source texts were um, books of historical fiction written by Japanese authors in which they imagined events from the perspective of Europeans living in Japan during that time period. So that connection I felt with those authors and what they were attempting, I felt there's a sincerity in what I was attempting to that made it valid. But ultimately, again, that's not my judgment. It's the judgment of the people reading it. And there's nothing I can do about that at this point.
Okay, yeah, that's because I feel like, in this day and age, everything is recorded, everything is, ooh, this is this or this is that. A lot of things can be taken for cultural misappropriation, of course. So I feel like it's good that you recognize that, you sort of try the line and boundaries and all of that. So I feel like that's important. Okay, so I'm Frank. So your main character, Mark, because I've started reading the book, bit of a haughty guy, but that's that. So I started reading the book, and so Mark, he's your central character here. And then was his character complex to define as well because it's sort of like a human living amidst robots and that sort of thing. So how did you?
Yeah, so Mark is pulled together from pieces of my life, friends.
Mm-hmm.
But the central character is, think of any of us when we're really good at something and it's starting to go. And the challenges in this case are robots and his age and body, which is beginning to break down. But the central struggle is, do I have any more in me, or is it time? And that's what the book takes you through. A series of games in the season where he's really coming face to face with it. Is this it? And in that sense, it's always trying to pit this futuristic, kind of cool, setting of robots and humans in an action sport with the humanity of choices we still face. So in the future, we're going to face these same choices we do today. Do I still have it? What do I need to do to continue to excel? Think of all the greats in the sports we have today. Whether in my era, Wayne Gretzky, right, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. These guys. What drove them. You're right, and in the football era, there's some characters referenced. So Joe Montana, quarterback character in my era, was one of those who kind of, really you thought of that as you watched them.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we're gonna leave, you know, the techniques of the book for a second and then branch into lighter, less weighty matters. So I know you both have other works that you've done. From Frank, for instance, you were telling me that Only Human is that, like, it's in the world of other characters that I've written as well. And then for you, Travis, I think I saw something about you writing a political satire novel. based in the US. Did that ever come to fruition, or
Yeah, I mean,
I do my research?
I started it, and yeah, great job with the research. Um, Basically, like, I'm being very broad when I say this.
Basically, the U.S. became too weird for Travis to convince.
Please
There,
be
folks.
honest.
In a way, I kind of predicted what would be happening right now,
Oh my God.
but it happened so fast that I couldn't get the novel written in time. So,
Really?
I just kind of set that one aside, and I've gone back to more of a Japanese milieu.
Okay.
Uh,
So do you?
sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like, so do you think that that's the genre you're gonna be sticking with for the time being?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of writing a trilogy. The first
Mm,
book's done. I'm working on the second one this summer.
okay.
I should finish it by the end of August, and then
Mm.
I should be able to write the third one next summer. But I would like to come back to Canada at
Oh,
some
really? Yeah, because you grew up in Thunder Bay, right?
day. That's right.
All right. Okay, that's great. So you predicted, maybe you could have predicted. So can you predict the U.S. elections happening? Could you predict that for us? Just, we won't tell anyone. Could you just
Yeah.
predict that?
Well, just based on the last couple elections, I would say nothing's in the bag yet.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of time to pass between now and November, so I'm curious to see.
Yeah, we all are at this point. Okay, Frank, I don't know if you predicted anything with your book as well, but we'll see. For your other works, could you tell us a bit about that as well? Like the world you envision, since you said all these characters, all these books are set in the same, like,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So, University of Ottawa, coming out of grad school, I did some writing in fiction, science fiction, and horror, mostly in that era. Um,
Okay.
so, since then I've worked in the corporate world, and I've only done that on the side and gradually getting back into it, and specifically in the science fiction stories. So there've been some other ones that were published, some others that weren't published. So the thought is to collect these into an anthology, centered around the planet that many of these characters dwell on, Naropa, where Mark's team is. But one of the other stories, which is available now on YouTube for free, it's an audio short story, The Girl and the Human. That was my first ever published story in 1994. So really going back 30 years. And it's also right around the Ottawa time. I think that fall we started. I'm not sure. It was 94 or 95, but I'm pretty sure we started in 94, and that's when Travis and I met. So that story kind of like is an interesting timing. And it was originally written and published as The Boy and the Alien, but since then I have a daughter, and I wanted to kind of reimagine it. And there were also some other interesting things that, as a creator, I always remember hearing all this discussion on social whenever an author, dares to change his or her work. So it was kind of fun to go through that and ultimately be the own arbiter and offer a reimagining. So thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so like just very random, like, question, like, who are your favorite authors? I know this is a very cliche question to ask authors, but who is your authors you looked up to growing up? You know, like, Travis.
Both of us, Travis, yeah, go.
Yeah, my favorite authors, they kind of change, through the decades, right?
Mm.
But one I could cite immediately would be Kawabata Yasunari. He won a Nobel Prize,
Oh.
and I think he might have been the first Japanese novelist to win the Nobel Prize. He wrote these
Wow.
short books. They were only about 130 pages long, but they were almost like a haiku expanded over the length of a novella, whichever you would call it. And the imagery and the feeling he could evoke in so few words was just incredible. So definitely an influential author for me.
Okay. Wow, Nobel. Oof. That's quite a lot to live up to. Frank, you?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this a little differently. I'm going to give you what I'm calling my Desert Island 7 books. So
Oh.
these are 7 books that, for me, that I want with me on a desert island. So A River Runs Through It, Norman MacLean. Actually, A River Runs Through It and Other Stories. High Fidelity, The Caves of Steel, Isaac Asimov, The Rosie Project, The Razor's Edge, Hunger Games, and Old Man's War.
Mm. Yeah, I remember one time I don't think I should be saying it, like, I was so into Hunger Games, I was reading it in church, and then pastor was preaching, I was just reading it, and then I had finished, and I'm like, that was the last book, and I was like, oh, no, I have to at least, like, listen to what is being said, and I was out of it, so yeah, I do agree with you on that one. Uh, all right, so that's amazing. We're almost done, basically. Okay, just looking at my notes here. So, as alumni, basically, just like in a few sentences, could you just reflect on your time at U Ottawa? Just give it a shout out to the school. Like, how was your time here? I'm sure it was totally different from now, but like back then, how was it in the 90s at U Ottawa? Frank, you go.
Yeah, so for me, it was a hugely amazing experience because this was not only graduate school, but it was a new country. There were different languages spoken. I was a foreign international student. There was an existing class as well as a new class coming in, and growing up on the border, U.S. to Canada, it had fulfilled a lot of kind of childhood interest in exploring in Canada further. So as to how it's changed, I'm here now and still exploring that. But I think one of the things I'm finding is there's a lot more to do here than I did then. So I'm looking forward to continuing to learn that. So.
I know you're biking like this period. Have you ever like biked around the school, like just gone past it, just like maybe like reminisce a
This
bit?
afternoon, I'm doing that. Yeah, this afternoon is going by
Oh my
there. But
God, great!
nothing else so far, yeah.
That's totally great. Travis, how about you?
Yeah, well, I still make sure I drive by father and son.
Ah, I went there for breakfast. Well, it was late, so brunch. So good. The food is good.
Yeah, it's a University of Ottawa classic. Yeah, I would say like the graduate school experience, it wasn't what I was expecting, but it was still worthwhile. And so
Yeah.
I would say to anyone considering postgraduate studies, it's worth it because it's unpredictable,
Yeah.
but whatever happens, you'll appreciate it. Like I went in thinking, maybe I'd like to be an English literature professor. And within days of arriving, I was like, nope, this is not for me.
You knew. When you know, you know.
Yeah, I was just like, this is not for me, and but now I'm here, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to take the courses, I'm going to graduate. And, but the friendships I made, being a teacher's assistant helped me realize that teaching is a passion for me.
Oh.
And then one thing, I should thank Professor Nick von Maltzen. He took some time out when I was in a real low, and he helped me with my writing. He showed me actually some really basic mistakes I was making that I just kind of gotten away with, through high school on the strength of my ideas. And, I appreciate it. It was kind of like a bad medicine, but he delivered it in a very kind way. And I was able to work on those, challenges and overcome them over the coming years in my 20s. So it was a really great experience overall.
Okay, well, for someone currently doing her graduate degree, I really appreciate the words, like saying it's worth it, because sometimes it feels like it's not, but then, pushing through and all of that. It's because my undergrad was in law, so my master's been in communication is like a different 180. So, a lot of things I don't really grasp at first because so you here saying that really feels like, okay, maybe it's not like the worst thing in the world, because yeah, so I appreciate that. I really do. Okay, so just two more random questions. I know you grew up in Canada, so this would not be for you, but Frank, did you ever end up liking poutine?
So
I don't like it, I'm sorry.
It's like, I would just say it's fattening, but good. Just leave it at that. Yes. Yeah. So that is one of the things I'm glad that is not readily available to me in the US. So
Thank you.
yeah, appealing.
For equity's sake, let me guess, Travis, you like it, right?
I mean, we didn't have it in Thunder Bay. So the first time I
Mhm.
tried it was in Ottawa. I loved it.
Oh God.
And I'm glad it spread throughout Canada. Yeah,
It's everywhere, but I'm not gonna say anything. All right.
there's
Okay.
even Japanese poutine now.
Oh my, really?
Yes,
No,
there's
no.
some kind of fusion restaurants in Toronto that serve it. It might change your thinking about it.
Nah, I love Japanese food. Don't ruin it for me. Don't ruin it for me, please. Don't do that. Don't do that. Well, that's great. Okay, so to the aspiring writers there, because a lot of people want to write, right? But then from what you said so far, it's not as easy as Hollywood makes it out to be. Just write something and oh, that's it. So what would be your advice to aspiring writers everywhere, Frank?
Yeah, I would say, it's about creating your own vision. And writing, I think, is now more than just putting words on paper. That's you
Yeah.
bringing a vision in whatever combination of tools and words, that could be part written with visual. So I think, try to, find what you want to say and why you want to say it. There's a lot of noise out there. A lot of people want to profit from you, tell you how to write, tell you how to do social media. So it's just, what do you want to say and why, like, to the world? I think, get into that, and it should be something that's bringing you value, whatever you're looking to do.
Okay, and sorry, Travis. The
Yep.
second question before I jump onto you, especially since you wrote about tech and all of that, do you think there will come a time, maybe in the not so distant future, where AI and tech will make the work of writers obsolete?
I would never say obsolete. It will change it. I think Star Trek, which many people know, it envisions a world where there's a holodeck, so you can go in, create things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think one of the things is what AI will do is, like, think of just like, okay, so we're having this discussion. How many things that were said? Like, none of
Yeah.
that now has been written down, right? So what AI will do is it'll help us with our creations parse information much faster to create more. So I think it's always like nature, the seasons where,
Mm-hmm.
uh, as tech is added, we have new ways to create, old ways to create become, their time passes. So that's why
Okay.
it's very cyclical.
All right, Travis, same questions. Advice to inspire aspiring writers and the question about AI.
Yeah. Quickly, three pieces of advice I would share. One, sometimes it might help to build a platform first. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're great at social media, like, get to 1 million followers, then go to a publisher and
Mm-hmm.
pitch your book, and you'll have a much better chance. Second thing I would suggest is maybe consider writing scripted television, with streaming and things like that.
Yeah.
Might find a bigger audience and you'd be able to collaborate with the team. The third thing I'd say, if you really want to be a writer, like in your 20s, go for it. Don't have a fallback plan. Don't take a full-time job. Like, if you're
Mm-hmm.
really committed, you've got to find a way.
Okay.
If you have a full-time job, you're just going to be pushing it off till later in life. And, you might not be able to fulfill your dream that way. Now, as for the AI, I was thinking, like, I know some people just say, oh, I want to read a book about Japan set in 1580. And, a chatbot might just be able to produce a story for a person and they'll move on. But I also think of things like people still crave analog experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have a choice between playing a drum or playing a virtual drum, some people will just want to program it and they're fine with that. But a person who really enjoys that tactile feel of playing an instrument, they're still going to do it. So
Okay. Yeah.
the solution might be like a certified non-AI book. There might be people who say, I want to know this came from a human mind and I want to read like this analog experience literature. So that might be a way for writing to survive even in an AI world.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's still the physical feel. Not everything. Everything is AI or chat GPT at this point, but that back to grass, touching grass feeling, yeah, it never grows old. So yeah, I appreciate your comments to the both of you. So we've come to the end of this interview, and before we sign off, can you let us know where to find you, website, social media, Frank?
Sure. So yeah, so thank you very much. So to learn more about me or any of my content in Only Human, my website ravenweb.net. You could also find us on YouTube and Instagram, Only Human, and again the audio David Copper, also on my YouTube, linked to him as well.
Thank you, Travis.
I'm not on social at the moment, but I do have a website, www.travisbelrose.ca. It's hosted through a friend's server. So if you get some warning sign that, oh, this isn't a secure connection or this is a spoof, it's me. It's okay. And I'm not collecting any personal data about anyone. I've shut off all the analytics. So you're safe to visit. I think the other thing, Amazon, my books are easy to find there in both ebook and physical form. And Jennifer, I'd like to thank you too. You're a very lively interviewer. I enjoyed your questions and the research you put in and kind of the joy you brought to this entire experience. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And yes, I did get the spoof. This might not be a safe, server. And I was like, huh. I still went through with it because I sort of, still knew it was there. But yeah. So to people listening or watching, I did get spoof, but you'll be fine. Okay. So yeah, that was great. Thank you guys so much for taking the time, despite the maybe in your next book, Frank, you write about technical difficulties. Yeah. So it's been honestly been fascinating, talking to you guys because I'm an avid reader. I love to read and I dabble in sci-fi. I love the Japanese culture. So it's been amazing learning from both of you. I do plan to visit Japan. It's beautiful. I would want to visit Japan, honestly. And then, so yeah, so Only Human, so the samurai poet, not project, poet, you know, um, amazing. I can't wait. I'm gonna read your book, of course. I'm in the middle of reading yours, Frank. So yeah. So that's it for us, you
Oh,
guys. Thank you so much. I think the
Being
background,
defeated by technology again, Frank.
yeah.
Check it out. Analog backdrop.
You see? Yeah, you never mess with the original. Never mess with the original. You can't do that.
thanks. All right. Thank you all.
All right, you
Okay.
guys. So yeah. So this has been good. Have a good one. Bye.
All right. Bye.